Soms ooit was 'n verkoopskaai om daar hoog in die blou lug te kan draai en draai, of van bo uit die wolke af te kyk. Hoe die sonveld ver daaronder aan die Weskus lyk. Vlerke wyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Vlerke wyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Om vlerke spanning koers te kry, word hy beskraal en Elandsbaai verloor vlei. Nou net weer te glip oor Wolfuis, Postduif klip en aan die ander kant van Doornbaai het die sessienspoor noordoos te draai. Vlerke wyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Vlerke wyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to our Bosberaad tonight. Probably being called the Indaba now in English. I haven't found the right word for Bosberaad, but we can talk about the Bosberaad. I'll bring in Chris now. Guys, as you have all know, we are going to talk tonight about the following. And it's a special evening, a special broadcast. Tomorrow is elections in the United States. It is a hot, contested situation, and the presidential elections of 2024, there's a lot of guys that don't know or realize what is the influence it can have on us. But with that in mind, I see the people say 5 out of 5, they are all there. I'm going to bring Colonel Chris Wyatt, Colonel retired Chris Wyatt, onto the stage. And there you are. Chris, good evening. How are you?
Hey, Venant, goeienaand. I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's great to see you. And there's a lot of excitement with this elections coming up, especially the approach to the elections and what you are hearing and reading. And the interesting thing. Wat 'n lekker losmakertjie. I'm going to do the following.
Okay.
I'm adding this to the stage. And that is...
it's sad because it's true, Venant. It's true.
Yeah.
It's the Wahrheit.
Yeah, if they say, if they will raid a house for a squirrel, they're sure as shit going to come after you. Now, that is, of course, the Simpsons. And now, look at the following. The story of Peanut the squirrel.
I've been so busy. I haven't seen Eli's tweets. I've got to go save those things. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And then, of course, the one here that says that, I can't actually see it, but read it, but it basically says that if they can come into your house and kill your pets, they will come into your house after you as well. And then,
This is
uh,
look. This is such a dumb move by government authorities because people don't associate killing pets with Trump. They associate it with the out of control leftist government. So this is going to harm her campaign for those undecided, no doubt about it. Just like Trump going to McDonald's, Trump with the garbage truck and the orange vest, all this stuff really humanizes Trump and demonizes the left, which they deserve. By the way, you said you're not sure a word for Bosberaad. I think the best word would be Bush Council. You're holding a Bush Council, you know?
yeah, probably, yeah. But anyway, Chris, I was this afternoon in a place called Cash and Carry. They are selling, wholesale food stocks and stuff. And I listened to the news while I was walking through this shop. They broadcast it. And they say that the chances are very good that Kamala Harris is going to win, and she will be the first black female president of the United States. And then they say, well, if Trump by chance come into power tomorrow, it will be by crooking. Now it's interesting. That's the news that is being broadcast in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And if I listen to the news, if I read the newspapers, I read the articles, it's all against Trump. Trump is the most evil man in South Africa. Now, I know because I don't watch the mainstream media, because I don't believe what they say, I'm going in search of all other things. The media won't say anything about Peanut, the squirrel, for example. You know, we also got a squirrel here, but he's called Cyril the squirrel.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah. So, taking that as a starting point, where are we standing right now with the elections going forward?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Bye, Donkey. It's a pleasure. I've not done this particular program with you, but I have been on one of your other programs. And of course, you and I do the fireside with the Colonels episodically. So we'll probably do that soon after the election if you were up for that. I've just been so busy with other events. But yeah, so let's get to it. First off, the statement you said there, not your statement, but a statement in South African media, is first off a lie and then propaganda. And the first lie is that Kamala Harris is black. Kamala Harris is not black. She is Indian, Tamil Indian, and mixed race Jamaican, overwhelmingly white European. Although the appearance of her father is very light skinned and black, obviously she even has grandparents that were white. So it's just the whole thing is a lie. She's not the first black woman to be elected. She would be the first woman elected president if she's elected. So that's just an outright lie. And Trump has been attacked for saying that. Well, it's a statement of fact. It's provable. Anyway, and who cares whether she's black, white, green, or blue? It really doesn't matter. It's whether she's competent, which she's not. So that's the lie. The propaganda is that they want me to explain the Electoral College. Just remind me to do that, and I'll get back to that. Okay. It doesn't override the popular vote. That's nonsense. That's a misconception, and I'll explain that. But the propaganda is that she's going to win the race. Now, she could win the race, but let me explain something. All of this talk started on Sunday, just a day ago, early in the morning, when the New York Times released the New York Times Siena poll. This is one of hundreds of polls around the country, and it has proven to be historically unreliable in the past two election cycles. This poll said that after 2 weeks of every major poll showing Donald Trump ahead in all 7 of the so-called battleground states, which is where the electoral votes will be harvested to make the difference in this race, he's ahead in all of them. A very small amount in the polls, but he was ahead in all of them. And he was even ahead by 3 points in national polls now. Almost every national poll had him ahead. Trump has never led in the national polls at any time in the history of him as a candidate or as president. After 2 weeks of that, this one poll, an outlier from the gray lady, the dingy gray lady of journalism, that's the New York Times, as we call it, the New York Slimes, comes out and says that Kamala Harris is surging, she's ahead. The problem is that the Emerson poll, a much more reliable poll, which is probably incorrect, has come out, like, for instance, in Iowa, where they claim that she's ahead. The Des Moines Register says she's ahead by 3 points, and the New York Times, she is trailing Trump by 11 points, according to Emerson. My point here is that this is one report and everybody's running with it because they want to affect the voters who haven't voted yet. They want to affect the narrative. They want to change the momentum that Trump has had. Trump blew this thing out of the water when he got shot, and then they tried to kill him again. And then he really blew it out of the water when she talked about working at McDonald's, but she couldn't prove it, and she couldn't remember anybody that worked with her there as a rising sophomore in the summer of 1983. I was a rising sophomore in the summer of 1983 at university. You were probably in the bush back then, but I was a rising sophomore, and I worked that summertime. I have the pay stubs from Ohio University when I worked bussing tables in the kitchen, and I also have my tax returns, which are freely available. She can't provide. So Trump did this thing, went to McDonald's, and it was awesome. And he could relate to people. People loved it. Then, of course, after Joe Biden called everyone that votes for Trump garbage, he got a garbage truck and he rode around with a vest. Yeah. And because of that surge, which was increasing his lead, they come out with this nonsense. Look, it's propaganda. You can't believe it. So where do we sit right now? According to the polls, an unbelievably tight race. According to my experience on the ground in at least 4 states here in the East Coast in the past 3 months, my experience is that the sentiment is that Trump will win the Electoral College, in my view, with a landslide. But it could go the other way because of close races. But he should win it in a landslide, over 300 electoral votes. He only needs 270 to win. And I believe that Donald Trump, if voters go out and vote, regardless of states being traditionally Democrat wins, like New York and California, he will win the popular vote, which would be the first Republican to do that in a long time, since George Bush in 2004. Anyway, that's where we sit today on the eve of the election.
Chris, the fact that they are trying to tell the world that Kamala, or whatever her name is leading, is it because they have a plan to steal this election? And if so, how are they going to steal it?
Well, regardless of whether election is stolen or not, whatever the outcome of this race, if it's even remotely close, we will see dozens of lawsuits. There are over 1,000 Democratic lawyers are ready to pounce in the battleground states. There are Republican lawyers who are also in the battleground states ready to pounce and refute this stuff. Elections can be stolen. Now, many of my viewers know, and I don't know if all your viewers know, I'm actually an elected official. I'm a judge of elections. And that means that I have a role on election day. I oversee the operations of a polling station. And the polling station that I'm at is the second largest in York County, which is one of the counties where there were just fraudulent voter registration applications submitted to the county on the last day, and they were identified. So we have that going on. That doesn't affect my polling station, but I'm a judge of elections. And I can tell you that at our polling station, it's impossible to cheat. It would take collusion on a grand scale and technical know-how that I can tell you that none of the people who work for me on election day have any knowledge on how to do this. It is a secure system, and it does use Dominion, but we use paper ballots. You get a paper ballot with a Sharpie, you fill it out, you feed it yourself through the machine, you look to see that the votes are tallied, and it goes and drops the ballot into the bottom of a locked drawer, which has a numbered seal on it, which is open at the beginning. It's registered by multiple witnesses, then at the close. So that's not where it can be stolen. But every state's different. All right. And I can't account for all 67 Pennsylvania counties. I can account for the polling station of the 140 that are in my county. That one I can account for, the second largest. But people can steal elections through fraudulent mail-in ballots with drop boxes. They can steal elections by having corrupt election officials at polling county boards of elections where they go through votes. It's lots of ways to do it. They're always talking about these electronic machines. That's possible, I suppose. But the bottom line here is most traditional fraud that's been committed historically, whether it's by Democrats or Republicans, typically has to do with illegitimate voters who aren't voters, or people casting ballots on behalf of people who aren't going to vote who are legitimate voters. That's where it usually happens. Can the election be stolen? Sure. Do we have any evidence of it? No. What we do have evidence of is election interference and tampering. Election interference by the media, election interference by the Liberal Party or Labour Party from the UK coming over here and illegally campaigning for Kamala Harris, and from New Zealand. That's a federal crime, but they're doing it and no media paying attention to it. They announced it on their LinkedIn page, the leader of that PR effort, and then she removed her LinkedIn account after she was caught doing it. They're over here doing it. So those things can happen. We also have seen election irregularities, and I'll finish here in a second. For instance, here in Pennsylvania, the district attorney, Heather Adams, in the county across the river, the Susquehanna River from me, about 50 kilometers from here, she reported last week that on the final day of turn-in the week prior for voter registration for mail-in ballots, they received 2,500 from one canvassing group. which is a group of people that are paid to get people registered to vote, which is legal. You can do that. You can't pay people to register, but you can pay someone to get people to register to help them. And they started going through it, and they quickly determined that 60% of the applications were fraudulent. That's 1,500 applications to get a ballot. Now, if they had not paid attention and processed those and sent ballots out, maybe somebody could have voted illegally. But I will tell you that in that case, in the case of my county, what I believe happened, Wyatt, is that there is a financial self-interest for the people doing the canvassing. They're getting paid by a group, a Democrat-sponsored group, to register people of color, and they are getting paid probably by the hour and the number of registrations they get. So they probably fudged a bunch of registrations, my estimation, so they could get paid. And I doubt that ballots going to go out. But then we also have a situation in Washington and Oregon where people put incendiary devices at drop boxes, which I said are a dumb idea 4 years ago. And they burned 409 ballots in one of the boxes. Those people don't get to vote now unless they go to the website and check to see if their ballot came in. Then they're going to have to go get a new one. It's crazy. We're going to see nonsense regardless of who wins. Lawfare starts November 6th. At 8 a.m. when they flood the courts with their petitions. That's what's going to happen. Get ready for
it. Chris, let's quickly look there at Wyatt beside the question of the electoral college.
Sure. Okay, so Wyatt Besidenhout, your question, we have a unique system unlike any other in the world. In my view, as an American, and I'm biased, but I'm right. In my view, it's a novel, brilliant system. When America chased the British out of here, long before the Boers chased them out of South Africa, they moved away from the Great Trek, when we chased the British out of our country in 1776, declared independence, in 1783, won our independence, and we had the Articles of Confederation. We had a loose confederation, kind of like Switzerland, cantons, of 13 colonies. And the centralized government was very weak. It couldn't raise money properly. It couldn't raise an army properly. And we were very fortunate to win the Revolutionary War. If it hadn't been for the French helping us out, we might not have won. So the founders quickly realized that that was a poor system. You needed a stronger central government, not a strong, but a stronger, one that had clearly enumerated powers. So in 1787, they met at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and they drafted a constitution, now the world's oldest surviving constitution, and the one that almost every country has emulated. And it's very brief and very clear and very succinct. That constitution created an electoral system that ensured that the 13 colonies would ratify the Constitution. Otherwise, they wouldn't have joined America. They're already in it, but they could have left at that point. So you have to understand that when that convention met, there were 4 large states of the 13 that were now states. 4. Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia. Those 4 states had about 75 to 80% of the population, the wealth, and they could determine what the rest of the states must suffer. So it could have been tyranny of the minority of states, because it wasn't the people that were deciding the Constitution. It was the state legislatures that had to ratify to ensure that the states' interests were protected, because the states are very different. Connecticut is very different than South Carolina, and North Carolina is very different than New York, culturally, politically, economically. So what they did is they created a system to ensure that states were represented fairly. That's why we have a bicameral legislature. We have a Senate and we have a House. The Senate is the senior body, but the Senate, the senior body, is comprised of 2 senators from every state. Now, Wyoming has a population of 550,000. California has 38 million. Both states get 2 senators. And you'd say that's unfair. It's not unfair. The purpose of the Constitution was to represent the states equally and fairly, to avoid tyranny of the majority. The people are fairly represented in the House of Representatives. Each of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives is broken down in population. That's why you have these weird shaped districts all over the country. Some in Texas is sparsely populated, so they're huge. Others, like, around Chicago, heavily populated, very small district geographically. So the House of Representatives is where the people are represented. That's why it's frequently called the People's House. So that's the junior house, though. It's the senior house that puts checks and balances against the courts and against the president. So the reason for electoral college is so the states are represented. In the electoral college, every state gets 1 vote for each senator and 1 vote for each representative. So California gets 54 votes, okay? Because they got 38 million people. So they are represented fairly. Wyoming, it has 2 senators, so it's represented in controlling the government fairly, but it only has 3 votes because it gets a minimum of 1 vote. It doesn't even have enough to actually get that 1 vote. You have to have like 685,000 to get 1 vote in the House, but they get 1 vote. So they have 3 votes. versus California's 54. That's why you have this situation where things look so strange to people outside America and many Americans because they're ignorant of their own system. So the point I'm making here is that the states are fairly represented. If you did not have this unique system, in order to win an election, all people would have to do is go to New York, California, Florida, Texas, and one other state, and they win the election. It's over. They would never address the needs of people in Iowa. They would never listen to people in New Hampshire. They would never go to North Dakota. That's like Canada. Why would he go there? There's only 300,000 people there. Who cares about those people? I need the votes in California. So in order to ensure that the people are represented fairly and equally, we have this system. And I think it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If you had a system like this that was based, let's say, I'm not recommending, but say it was based on ethnicity, well, then the Boer and Afrikaner would have a voice in South African politics instead of being silenced, because you would have a system where people would be represented by ethnicity. Here it's represented by states. States' rights are critically important. And let me go back to that one point. To ratify the Constitution, 75% of the states must ratify it. And then every time we do an amendment, 75%. The legislatures. Those legislatures from South Carolina, from Maryland, from Delaware, from New Jersey would never have joined the Union under the Constitution if they didn't have this system, because they would not have been protected. They would have joined the Union if it was just based on the popular vote, and then they would never have a say at all. There's no point, and nobody would ever come to the states. They would never develop. So it's a unique system. It doesn't defraud anybody. Let me see. It's do they hold the power to override? So the popular vote only matters from a standpoint of who wins a state. And one more point on this. In 48 of the 50 states, because the states write their election laws, not the federal government. It's up to the states. In 48 of the 50 states, the first past the post. So if you get 50 plus one, or there's 4 candidates and you get 25 plus one, it's more than the other 3, you get all the electoral votes. However, in Nebraska and in Maine, those state legislatures have their law set up so they divide it based on population. So you get the votes for population, and then each congressional district. They're the oddballs. The rest of them, it's winner take all. So that's why California automatically gives Democrats since 1988. Not a Republican hasn't won it since Bush in 88. Since 92 forward, every time California's votes over 50, now 54, go to the Democrat. Gives them a huge advantage. They need 270. They already got 54. So you throw in the entire West Coast, and they already have 100 of the 270 they need. So there you go. It's but that's a system. It's fair. It's unique, and I love it.
Yeah. But Chris, can they override the popular vote, to say it like that?
So the only way I understand that question, if are you saying, can the electors go to Washington, D.C. and certify and vote contrary to what the vote is in their state? If they do that, they're disqualified. They're disqualified.
Okay.
Yeah, and then someone's replacing them. Now, that's actually an elected position. The people who do that, you actually have to go on the ballot to be an elector. So, it's not the senators and the congressmen who do the vote. It's actually an electoral college. Those people are elected. And that was a whole scandal in 2020, claiming that Trump had fake slate of electors nonsense. It's not true. Each party gets people in the primary voted, and they get elected to be the persons who go to meet electoral college, because you don't know who's going to win. So in 1960, Hawaii became a state for the first time, the first election they participated. The Republicans were declared the winner. Nixon won in Hawaii. Initially, that's what the state said. But because the margin of victory is so small, by state law, they had to recount the ballots. So the Republicans sent their electoral college representatives to Washington, D.C. The Democrats, who appealed that, sent theirs. They both sent a slate of electors. Then the state said, no, the Democrats won. Kennedy wins it, so the Democrats get to vote. But nobody charged the Democrats of being, or the Republicans of being fake electors, because they weren't, or the Democrats. Anyway, it's a little complicated.
Yeah. But Chris, it raises a lot of questions. So if, say, Donald Trump came into power, he won this election, and he's the next president-elect. Mm-hmm. How can they stop him, others, or beside or beyond the fact that they can kill him?
Well, that's a very fair question. And I said that for a long time. I said they've done all but try to kill him. And guess what? Now they've tried at least twice, maybe more, that we don't know about. So how can they stop him? Well, they will try to stop him. I guarantee it. Trump wins the election when they go to certify the electoral college, because the electoral college meets in December. It's usually around the 6th of December. The states have to forward their certified results to the electoral college and to the Congress, and they give it to electoral college. They meet, they vote. It's a pro forma thing. You vote for, who you're supposed to. Then that goes, those results which we already know, go to the Congress, the new Congress, because new people are elected. They're sworn in before the president. So they're sworn in the first couple of days of January. Then they vote to ratify what the Electoral College sent them based on the election. What happens is that if a member in the House of Representatives and a member in the Senate, one person in both of those bodies stands up and says, I oppose the results from Pennsylvania. I say that we must look at these and review them. They're not valid votes. If they do it in both houses, then they have to stop the certification, and then they have to deliberate on it in the House and Senate about what the deal is, are they legitimate or not. Now, the Democrats did this in 2000. They tried to stop George Bush's certification. One Democrat in the House stood up and said no. But the problem is that no one in the Senate stood up, so they didn't stop it. You have to have someone in both bodies. In 2004, a disgustingly vile, race-hustling Democrat from Ohio stood up and said the votes in my state were manipulated. And Barbara Boxer from California in the Senate stood up, and they stopped counting. They went and deliberated to look at the results from Ohio, which was bogus. There was nothing going on. He lost badly there. So John Kerry lost badly. So that's what can be done. In 2020, Josh Hawley from Missouri, a Republican, stood up and said, I oppose the certification of Pennsylvania's results. They're not legitimate. We need to look at them. He was roundly attacked as a traitor, treasonous, a fraud, a right-wing racist and white supremacist. But the Democrats weren't attacked for doing the legal process. He was doing legal process because he was concerned about Pennsylvania. But because the media is controlled by the Democrats, that's a narrative got out there. So what the Democrats will do, Vaynant, the moment that they lose this election, they will do exactly what they accused Trump and his supporters doing 4 years ago. And they're already prepping the ground with all kinds of stories, which I didn't get to my news report, but if I do a Night Owls, I'll cover it, in which they're like, they're going to be election deniers. They're going to deny that Trump won. They're going to file lawsuit after lawsuit. And then when it comes to January, to answer your question specifically, to certify the results, one member of the Democratic Party or more in the House and in the Senate will stand up and say, we're not going to certify this state. We're not going to certify that state. And it will drag that process out probably for several days. It will be unprecedented in American history. We will see what happens. But that's how they try to stop it. But they can't stop it.
But going back to 2020, the big split between Donald Trump and Mike Pence is exactly because of that. Now we are sitting in a situation because Mike Pence, which was the vice president at the time, he could have stopped the process.
Well, that's what people believe in it, but that's actually not true. The law is not written. The law, which was written in the 1870s originally, it's been amended since then. The law does not allow for that. The role of the vice president in that process is ceremonial. It's not adjudicative. It's not legal. It's just ceremonial. They're just there to sign it because somebody has to sign the certification. So he can't stop it. The problem is that people on the right, some of them well-meaning, have spread this story for years, but they don't bother to look at the law. And that's why it's important for people to be patient and listen to these sort of things. So, I mean, I've heard that story for a long time. A lot of Republicans are angry at Mike Pence, and I think they should be angry at Mike Pence. He's a disloyal turncoat who betrayed Donald Trump, but not because of January 6th, but because his actions since then is what I'm talking about. There's nothing Mike Pence could have done on January 6th. The Republicans tried to do what was legal, and it just didn't go through. It didn't happen. So anyway.
So this year is quite different. The vice president who's going to sit there and who must sign off is Kamala Harris.
Yes, that's correct. You're right. That is correct. So when Trump wins, she'll have to sign the results. I love it. Yeah, I love it. So if she's incapacitated, there's a process for who comes next. I mean, if she's, but she's pretty stupid, she might be incapacitated. So, but yeah, that's who has to sign the certification. You're correct, Vice President.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy there, but Chris, the feeling I get, and I'm looking at a lot of people, and also I follow the polls and everything that is coming out. And I watched the performance of both candidates. Kamala Harris, who was not actually selected to be the Democratic
she was selected. She was not elected.
Yeah, she was not elected, yeah. And there's a thing that is not nice going on. But if you listen to the two, then it's clear to me that Donald Trump is going.
Is your coffee coming?
That Donald Trump is probably going to win. If I look at what I've saw and what I've analyzed on all the sides and stuff. But there's also a lot of guys that agree with that. But then I just want to show you this guy. I know maybe you know him. Colonel Davis. And he said there that the threat of civil war coming to America is real. And then why is tomorrow so important? Do you think it can develop to physical fighting? Is the Democrats going to mobilize mass protests paid by Soros, say after the results became visible? Do you expect something like that?
Yeah, this is a difficult thing to say. There are 450 million firearms in America. Let's get that out there first. And some people have quite an arsenal in America because it's legal to be a gun owner here. Anyway, although some states are like South Africa and the ANC, they try to keep you from registering and try to put laws in place, but most states are free. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that the anger in America is palpable. But most people who are angry are not angry people who are going to march on buildings and burn buildings. Most of the angry people are on the political left who are going to be angry when this happens. So will we see the left go crazy on a spat of terror and destruction? I think that's a very real possibility, but I doubt it will lead to a civil war. We saw this in the summer of 2020. Americans sat by and watched our cities looted, burned, and people murdered, and we did nothing as a society. The conservatives did nothing. The people on the right did nothing to stop Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Washington, New York, Atlanta, Chicago. They did nothing. Neither did Donald Trump or the government. Everyone watched the country burn. And so if we tolerated that, I think that we'll probably tolerate what's coming, what we expect. What we hope is that the government will employ law enforcement to stop this. If, however, these morons are dumb enough to come into our neighborhoods, particularly in peri-urban areas, then there's going to be a problem. And that's just the bottom line. I'll say it there. But I've seen the guy's name. I'm not familiar with him. Looks like he's a CAV officer. I just looked him up. I can't find much on him. It doesn't even, if you look me up, I'm surprised he's got a page. But anyway, so I'm not convinced that there's going to be a civil war, but the conditions are ripe for a civil war. I'll say that. The conditions are ripe. But I live in a conservative area where 2 out of 3 voters vote Republican. And I'd say that 55 to 60% of the population is solidly conservative. They believe in God, guns, and this country, and are patriotic. But, there are places where things are on the fringe, like in Maryland, where there are conservatives, and right next to them are these backcrap lunatic, trans loving, boys and girls sports, spend all the money, take it from the people who earn and give it to people who don't earn, let the borders open. That's a real friction point. And we may see some violence in places like that. Very real possibility.
That next question from Wyatt Bosberaad is, and it's a very valid and true question. If Trump got killed, who becomes the president? Is it J.D. Vance?
I believe it is J.D. Vance. I believe that's how it works. I don't know for a fact. That's a topic that people have been talking about. I can't find that in the law. The Constitution is very clear on who runs and who gets elected, but I'd have to dig through it very carefully. But I've been very busy with my War College consulting, and then my veterans organization, which was in serious financial jeopardy, and spent a lot of time there trying to keep it afloat, and then preparing for the election, because tomorrow I work from 5 a.m. until 23:30.
Yeah. No, so yeah, there is a lot of questions.
Sure.
But I think we have answered also quite a lot of uncertainties. And I also want to ask the questions, what is going to be the influence if Trump wins, he does get inaugurated, and he becomes the president? Will it be the end of wokeness?
No, no. These sick, twisted people will not go away until they're in the grave. And that's not a call to violence, you leftist hate wankers. Pay attention to what I said. Until they've left this earth with their demonic ideas, this will not end. And it will continue. Wokeness will continue. It will be pushed back, but it won't end. But we've already seen major pushback against wokeness by society, and it all started in a very clear time that we can specifically point to in America when Americans had enough of this stupidity. It was in Virginia when a high school student was raped in the high school bathroom by a fake transgender male pretending to be a female, raped this girl in the bathroom. Then the school covered up the rape. They knew about it. They didn't call the police. They didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell the parents. The father found out because his daughter was acting strange, and she finally confessed to him that she'd been raped at school. When she was raped, or when the father found out, he went to the parent teachers meeting, and he was accosted when he tried to ask them, and he raised his voice, and they accused him of violence, and the police violently ejected him from there, and he was arrested, if I remember correctly. That is when the tide began to turn against wokeness in America. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor of Virginia now, won Virginia. Understand that Virginia was reliably, for over a century, a Republican bastion of voting for a long time, a conservative state. But it has been contorted and distorted by the influx of the Beltway bandits who work for defense contractors, who work for government agencies, who do not live in Washington, D.C., but live on the other side of the Potomac River in Northern Virginia. They have swelled the population of Northern Virginia to where it's larger than the rest of the state, which is largely rural and agricultural. And those three counties, Loudoun County and Fairfax County and the other one there, those three counties are so large in population, full of leftist woke tards, that they have changed Virginia from a reliably red state to a blue state. Now, in this election that Youngkin won a couple years ago, no Republican candidate in the history of the state of Virginia has ever won every single county in Virginia. What's I think 80 or something like that counties. None. Youngkin, because of this issue, won every single county in Virginia. That was the turning point against wokeness. It doesn't mean it's dead. We can't put a stake through its heart. It's not that simple, because if you put a stake through the heart of wokeness, all of its appendages break off and spread, and then you've just got rats everywhere. You got to go find the rats everywhere. So this is not going to go away anytime soon. It's tragic that people are dumb enough to believe this stupidity, but it's the reality, and it's the reality I have to deal with. What I find shocking, real quick, Vena, is Americans are going to the polls or have already voted, early voting or mail-in balloting, on the premise that Donald Trump is going to end abortion. It's impossible. He has no authority to do it. Donald Trump is against women. That's utter nonsense. People are dumb as a box of rocks, and they vote that way. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. I wanted to ask something about that as well, but I'm going to leave it a little while. Again, if Trump wins, at least then the government will not promote wokeness like the current government is doing.
Correct.
What do you expect will be the influence worldwide by Donald Trump? I'm coming back to Kamala, but Trump. If there's now people from the UK and from New Zealand who is protesting against Trump, what is it? And if you look at the European Union, their statements against Trump. So Trump is not going to go to NATO with a very positive mind.
Well, what's going to happen here when Trump comes back in office is that a lot of these countries that have wokeness are going to be on notice, and they're going to have to stop their stupidity, or they're going to suffer the consequences of diminished U.S. interest in their economies and their defense, and that's the result. When Trump was president, he threatened NATO countries who failed to live up to their own pledges to spend 2% of their gross domestic product on national defense. They're a bunch of freeloaders riding off of American taxpayers who pay the bulk of the defense expense for NATO countries. And so Trump said, no, if you don't contribute 2%, we're not going to play. And as a consequence, many of these countries like the UK and others suddenly started contributing 2% out of fear that the US would actually leave NATO. We're not leaving NATO. But when it comes to wokeness, we're going to see a change internationally when Trump comes back in office. I'm certain of that. America will not tolerate some of the nonsense we've been tolerating. And Trump won't run again. So this time, he won't be as naive and stupid as he was when it comes to hopefully dumb appointments in his cabinet and in his inner circle and in bureaucrats. I mean, the fact that he didn't fire the FBI director the moment he became the president was the dumbest thing ever. The guy lied to him, and he committed a crime by lying to the president. If you're a subject of investigation, and you are talking about the investigation when you're under criminal investigation, and you're talking about the case without having been read your Miranda rights, it's a crime. And that's what he didn't fire that doofus. And it just started from there. He didn't go after Hillary Clinton when she should have been prosecuted for her crimes. And quite frankly, that's what needs to happen this time. And so they're terrified that he's going after his enemies list. But around the world, I think there'll be a very clear message to the world that we are not going to play this game of wokeness. How it pans out depends on each country. Look, there's been a rise of people who are, who've got their head on straight. Viktor Orban in Hungary. We've seen him there. We've also seen in Poland some good leadership rise up in Poland that it's got conservative voices. In the Netherlands, conservative parties are in the front now, and we're seeing in other places. Unfortunately, other countries have gone backwards. The United Kingdom is basically a gulag state. It's an absolute gulag state. Freedom of speech is banned. You can't even carry the British flag on British soil without being arrested. When you have people that are looting and burning the streets and beating English people because they're white and they're non-Muslim, so they're being assaulted, the police do nothing. It's unbelievable. People carrying Palestinian intifada flags around, marching in favor of terror groups on the streets of the United Kingdom. And a British person carrying a British flag is arrested because he's intimidating the terror supporters. I mean, the UK is gone. But other countries, the tide is turning. Sweden is now deporting these criminal alien invaders, which they should have done 30 years ago. The Germans are now starting to deport the millions of criminal alien scumbags that Angela Merkel let in. So I think that will gain steam with Trump in office. People will gain confidence if Trump gets back in. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, okay. That's a great take. I'm still not going to go to the war side. But if Kamala wins, what is the future?
I'm sorry, I was busy looking for a sock because I was going to imitate Kamala Harris. She's a sock puppet. What is the future? Yeah, it's economic collapse. First off, I don't think any of her policies will ever go into play here in economic policy. She's talking about a $25,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers, financed by people like me who got no tax credit and are paying taxes to finance that for people who don't deserve it. Why do they deserve it? What makes them more special than the people who came before them? Nothing. So that's not going to fly in Congress, regardless of who controls Congress. Then she talks about increasing the capital gains tax from 21 to 48%. Well, this is like South Africa. They're talking about increasing the social grant to 700. And they want to do it through a luxury tax. When only 1% of the population is paying taxes, they're all going to leave, those who have money. Seriously? It's stupid. So we're going to see malaise. The U.S. economy will do this, and probably at some point in the next 4 to 6 years do this because of the debt load. We are now paying $1 trillion in interest on the debt. Not the debt itself, the interest. That's insane. Our total budget is $7.4 trillion, and one of every $7 goes to pay debt. And that debt, Vaynant, is at 1% or less interest. Imagine if it was at current market rates of 4.5% to 5%. We would just collapse. We would be like Argentina in the 1980s. We'd have to devalue the dollar, and it would cause a global financial crisis. So I think we're in real trouble if Kamala Harris and the left stays in power. And when it comes to civil liberties and civil rights and freedoms, they will be extinguished. We've already seen this under the Harris-Biden regime for the past 4 years, where the National Institutes for Health, the CDC, the Department of Defense, the White House, and the FBI all colluded, cajoled, or coerced tech companies to silence Americans. Now, our Constitution protects us from the overreach of the federal government. And the Bill of Rights includes the First Amendment, which says the government can make no laws impinging on the freedom of speech or freedom of assembly or the press. But that's the government. The government using third-party agents, in this case, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, gets away with it. It's a crime. And that's what they've done. That's why my channel stopped growing. That's why my original channel was banned on YouTube, because of this nonsense. The federal government told these social media companies to silence me and thousands of others. And that's what happened. That will continue to happen. People will be arrested, and charged with fake crimes. Donald Trump is a convicted felon, except that he's convicted of a felony that doesn't exist. They created something that's not even a law that they have authority over. So that's what we're going to see in the future. We'll see people in prison. The January 6ers, those who haven't been charged yet, will wind up with absolutely outrageous prison sentences to keep them silent and hidden. It's scary future. They're running around calling Trump Hitler. They're already Hitler. They're already the fascists. They're already the authoritarian government. They've already impinged on our rights and freedoms, and they've destroyed and bankrupted our country with foreign wars. And enough. Genoeg is genoeg.
Yeah, I agree with you. But obviously, Trump is not going to make the same mistakes he made during his first appointment, because his general idea was that people working in the government is loyal to the president. That was his presumption. Mm-hmm. And that's not a fact. But now, that was wrong. That was a mistake on his side with the people that he surrounded himself with. But this time, there's something different in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
RFK, Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk,
Tulsi Gabbard,
yep. J.D. Vance, and all those people is going with him to Washington.
Yep.
And Elon Musk has already said that, well, he can save $2 trillion a year. Now, that's a big statement from his side, but maybe he can do it. Mm. The fact is now he got a very good team of people that is going with him. Mm-hmm. And all of them was previously Democrats.
Yeah, well, well, even J.D. Vance, you're right. I think he used to be a Democrat. Yeah.
And Trump himself was
famously Democrat. Yep. Pro-abortion Democrat. Yep.
Yeah. And it all changed now. But do you think that they, and I want to use the word they because they are going to Washington with a mission to clean out the mess? Do you expect CIA, FBI, do you see actions against the Bill Gates situation, the Fauci, BlackRock, and those guys that is the warmongering who is buying the loyalty of the guys in Congress and the senators? What kind of reaction do you see will happen if Donald Trump gets to Washington?
Well, first off, with BlackRock's activities are not illegal to my knowledge. It's an investment firm. People put their money in there. They're only as powerful as the assets that are under management, and they only get assets because they're successful. BlackRock, the people that run are pretty smart. If, in fact, the things that they invest in now are no longer in favor, say defense firms, I haven't looked at their investments, but let's say that's no longer in favor, BlackRock will put its money elsewhere in copper or into, fiber or, internet services or crypto. They'll put it where they can make money. It's a money management firm. People attribute it to evil things, and maybe they're there, but I haven't seen it. I was actually recruited by BlackRock to work there after I left the Army, but I wasn't interested. I don't want to live in New York. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, Trump made a mistake because Trump expected people to be loyal, and he's wrong in that. The people around him on his cabinet, his personal staff, owe him loyalty. They are his personal appointments. However, the bureaucracy and the military and all the officers in the federal government owe no loyalty to the president and should not owe fealty to the president. They owe fealty to this document, the Constitution. The problem is in the Trump administration, the people who owed fealty to the Constitution were disloyal to the Constitution in the bureaucracy and in his cabinet. So personal disloyalty in his cabinet is one thing. That's not a crime, but it's a fireable, it's a sackable offense. But someone who betrays the Constitution by undermining the president's directives because they think they know better, like that asshat Vindman, that Lieutenant Colonel jackass who ran his mouth and tried to undermine Trump's foreign policy in Ukraine and Russia, the Army Lieutenant Colonel who was disloyal to his oath, opening his mouth up and actively working against the President of the United States, he should have been court-martialed for that, quite frankly. He was actually doing things in conflict with the policy of the State Department, which was directed by the president. He has no authority to do that. So I need to make that clear. It's not about personal loyalty. And if Trump still thinks about personal loyalty, he's wrong. The bureaucrats that work in the government owe the country their loyalty. They owe the Constitution their loyalty. And the same with the military. I take an oath to support and defend the Constitution and follow all lawful orders of those appointed above me. If someone tells me to go shoot civilians, they can shove it. Now, if those civilians are attacking infrastructure, that's a different story. But peaceful civilians marching, I will never do that. That's illegal. And if Trump ordered me to do that, I wouldn't do it, even though he's the president. I'm loyal to the Constitution, not to Trump. That said, I'm a 3-time Trump voter.
Chris, what's going to happen to the woke officers? The admirals and
well, I'll tell you, that's a serious problem.
The transgender ones.
It's a problem. It's a problem. It's been bubbling for 25 years. I noticed this now. I was not a general. There's not a. And by the way, I'm kind of envious. You're a general now with Sightlinder's civil defense. I mean, how do I become a general? I want to become a general too. But maybe I got to join Sightliner Civil Defense. But no, I was not a general officer because there's no billets for general officers in my career field. I was in intelligence and I transferred over to the Foreign Area Officer program, knowing that I couldn't become a general. But hey, I mean, making lieutenant colonel is a big deal. Making full colonel is a huge deal. It's very hard to do. Very few people make general. It's very political. So the problem with this, I noticed now, the reason I mention is that I have been around thousands of general officers in all the services, U.S. military, plus foreign militaries. And I can tell you that from 9/11, about 2008, when Obama came in 2009, from 2009 onwards, after 9/11, I saw a distinct change in our general officers. And it actually started in Iraq. General officers who were averse to taking bold action, averse to taking risk, because they were more interested in their advancement and their pension and their lucrative post-employment opportunities than they were in leadership. That's a true statement. I've seen that time and again. Or they were more interested in their self-aggrandizement and believed their own press. They thought they were better than they were. Look, I could take 10 generals in any rank. Well, let's go with 1-star generals in the U.S. Army, pull them out, fire them all today, and I could take 10 colonels and replace them instantly with the same quality or better, and do it 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times, and still have a bench that's strong enough with the top quality. That's the bottom line here. So the generals have been a problem for a long time. Milley, a disaster. Now Admiral McRaven, the hero, the special ops guy, opening his mouth, lying about Kamala Harris and lying about Donald Trump, supporting Kamala Harris. These people are disgraceful. I've seen the worst of things from someone I never expected. General Hayden, the first 4-star intelligence general in the history of the United States, who became the director of the National Security Agency. I worked for him at the National Security Agency at a time of great turmoil, and he did a great job. Then he went and became the CIA director as a 4-star general. Unprecedented. Hadn't happened before. And then he became the deputy director of national intelligence. General Hayden spends all his time on Twitter demeaning Republicans, demeaning conservatives, and attacking Donald Trump. It's demented. This is not appropriate. These flag officers, many of them, betray their oath. And that's the bottom line. So they should be fired, because you can be fired anytime as an officer in the military by the president. Your commission is an appointment by the president of the United States and confirmed by the Senate, and he can fire you at any time. And he should. He should clean house. Clean house with all these woke tards that are currently in positions, putting lieutenant colonels who are men dressed as a woman in the Air Force giving speeches for the public. This is insanity.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that one. What would change in regards with foreign policy towards South Africa if Donald Trump win the presidency? And the alternative, what will happen in South Africa if Kamala Harris stays in power?
I think it has a lot to do with Trump wins. What happens with South Africa has a lot to do with how big a margin the Republicans gain in the House and if they gain control of the Senate. If they have a 15-seat margin in the House and they gain control of the Senate, then people who are influential, unfortunately, I'm not one of them. I'd like to be one of them. But if people are influential, I don't hang around D.C., who want to punish South Africa, and there are some people like that out there, some Africanists like me who, I'm not saying I want to punish South Africa, but they want to punish South Africa. If they get the ear of people in the House and Senate, then they will push to have South Africa move from AGOA, and it will happen. I don't think it's likely, though. but it's certainly warranted. South Africa's ANC has undermined the relationship with the U.S. Just today, Philip de Vet in Propaganda 24 ran an op-ed shamefully, disgustingly, disgracefully attacking my country and talking nonsense about my country, and especially spewing lies about Donald Trump, calling him a rapist, a convicted rapist, and all this other stuff. That's just pure lies. This is the garbage that people get away with in so-called media. But if Trump becomes president, one of two things will happen. Number one, no change. We're not going to pay any more attention to South Africa than we have. Nothing's going to happen. People got excited a few years ago when Trump, someone told him to tweet about, farm murder, and people got excited he's going to do something. I said he won't do anything. South Africa is not a priority. South Africa is not South Africa of 1975 or 1985. On the global stage, South Africa matters very little. Very little. People seem to think their inclusion in BRICS means something. BRICS isn't even real, so it means nothing. And even if it was real, 85% of the GDP comes from China in BRICS, not anymore. Now there's Algeria and others in it, but before last year it was 85%. Now it's probably about 60%. But the point is South Africa is a rounding error. Oh, but South Africa is important for global shipping lanes. Only if the Suez Canal shut down, and it was shut down for a month earlier this year, and the world survived, and we didn't even stop our ships in South Africa. They just went right past your ports. South Africa has the worst ports in the world, as independently judged by those who judge the quality of port operations, the worst in the world. South Africa doesn't matter. We don't need your gold. It's the 6th to 10th largest gold producer any given year. The cost of gold extraction in South Africa is pretty expensive now. The one thing you do have is platinum, but as these idiots move to EVs, we don't need platinum anymore for catalytic converters, so that demand falls off. South Africa does provide some great wine and some BMW parts, but beyond that, not much that America needs. So it will be ignored for the most part. If Kamala Harris becomes president, there will be the wokies who will push to have the U.S. spend more money and give more money to places like South Africa because they agree with the fellow travelers who support terrorists in Gaza and elsewhere. And so there might be a little more love coming South Africa's way. But I think the right thing is for Trump to win and then for someone to put the ANC on notice about AGOA. Either you stop, undermine the national security interests of the United States like they just did threatening Taiwan, telling them to remove their embassy from Hatfield by October 31st, or else stop undermining our national security with nonsense like the Lady R incident with maritime exercises off the coast of South Africa with Chinese and Russian destroyers. Stop that nonsense with Gaza, or you will pay a price. AGOA is a gift. We get no benefit from AGOA. You get all the benefit. You ship your goods from South Africa to America duty-free under AGOA, Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. We do not get reciprocity, and we don't ask for it. And people in South Africa seem to think that, screw America. They can have AGOA. We don't need it. Well, that's pretty stupid. If somebody who I disagree with gave me access to the marketplace like China, no duty, you think I'm not going to ship my goods there? I don't have to agree with them. I'm going to ship them there. So regardless of what happens, South Africa will not play a major feature in the foreign policy of the United States going forward, whether it's Harris or Trump. It'll be continuation of the last 8 years. That's my view.
Yeah. And the listeners must just bear in mind that we are talking tonight. We are not expressing policies or anything like that. We are just speculating on what can happen, what influence can be there, etc. But I agree with you on the stance that the ANC government has taken against Israel. That was a mistake. Well, we can think that the ANC government is leaning towards the eastern side, towards the BRICS side, very definitely. But then the government of national unity in South Africa is also divided because the DA part of it is pro-Western, while the ANC part of it is pro-Eastern. So there is going to be one hell of a fallout coming. And I think it might come quite soon after this election results appear. But we will have to see that. I've tried to follow all the questions that the guys brought in, but a lot of these questions that has been asked, we have actually covered in it.
Yeah, a lot of the questions seem to be duplicative. They're the same question, essentially. I was looking over there, too.
Yeah. Kamala gets elected, there is sort of a test that every elected person for president must go through.
Hey, Jacques, look, there's no test. I wish there was. The only thing you need to become president of the United States is an American citizen by birth. And that can be not on America, what can be outside the continental United States. People, for instance, John McCain was born in the Panama Canal Zone, which was U.S. territory when he was born there. Now it belongs to Panama. And Barack Obama was born in Hawaii, which was not an American state, but was an American territory, so he could become president. So you have to be 35 years of age, you have to be an American citizen, and that's it. You can be a convicted felon, you can be a rapper, you can be a farmer, you can be anything. Doesn't matter. But you have to be a natural-born American citizen at 35 years of age and you become president. And from that point on, it just becomes a popularity contest. Then you become president. It's simple as that. No test required.
And Department of Justice, what's going to happen?
Well, that's a place that needs to be cleaned out very thoroughly. The Department of Injustice, as I prefer to call it, has been used as a weapon against Americans and against the former president. They have pursued cases that are of questionable legal premise. They have gone after people with a demonic obsession, particularly those involved in January 6th, most of whom have been convicted of misdemeanor, but then sentenced to hard time in a federal penitentiary. Most people get a misdemeanor charge. It results in a small fine, maybe community service at worst case, and occasionally, if it's a misdemeanor that's of significance, maybe a short jail term in like a county jail. But we still have people, Vaynant, who have arrested in 2021 who have yet to be tried or charged with a crime. This is a violation of the Constitution. People are not allowed to be held indefinitely in jail. This is a violation of the Constitution, and this needs to be cleaned up. The Department of Justice is complicit in undermining the civil liberties, the rights, the constitutional rights of Americans. And what needs to happen is that people like Merrick Garland, if we can, now, a lot of people have qualified immunity for their actions, but if we can prove the malicious intent of these people, they must be pursued with criminal charges with the new Department of Justice. And Donald Trump must pick an attorney general that knows what the hell they're doing. Somebody like Ted Cruz. That's who he needs. Not some woke idiot or some get-along career politician like Jeff Sessions, who was his first attorney general. And then when that clown Comey came up with this nonsense to go after him, and they had this Russia collusion narrative, he recused himself. Why? Your job is to be there. And he let his underlings run with it, who were disloyal to the Constitution, who had a political agenda, who wanted to go after Trump. Trump needs to be very astute this time. He made some dumb mistakes in his first administration. I called him out as he did it, and he cannot make those mistakes this time. If people start burning and looting our streets, he needs to engage the governors in those states and get them to declare martial law in their states. And if they don't, he needs to pursue federal angles for martial law in those locations to suppress that garbage. We cannot tolerate this nonsense anymore. Can't.
But he only gets the power on January 20th.
Correct. There's an interregnum period after the election when all these processes take place. And that's when they went after Michael Flynn, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, U.S. Army retired general, whom I know, not a big fan of his, but he was selected as the national security advisor and talked to the Russian ambassador in Washington, D.C., which is his responsibility. You have to ensure a smooth transition. So you start talking to the diplomatic community in D.C. about relations that you're going to pursue afterwards. They fraudulently went after him, claiming he did something illegal, the Logan Act, which he did not do, or not the Logan Act, but anyway, something else. And it's just nonsense. Every administration does that. That's a responsibility. It's part of the transition. So Trump won't have any power till January, but we'll see. I'll tell you, look, here's a few things about Donald Trump that aren't going to happen. Donald Trump becomes president. He will not end the Ukraine conflict in day one. It's not going to happen. If you believe that, then you believe in fairy tales and unicorns. What he will do is begin serious discussions and use leverage to force Ukraine and Russia to the table. That's what he'll do. That's a fact. Donald Trump will not end inflation. Inflation is always here. Inflation was under control when Trump was president. It's been 30, 40, 50% or more with Biden, prices doubling. With Trump, it was 2% or less every year he's in president. So he will be able to tame inflation by curbing spending. Elon Musk trimming $2 trillion out of the budget, that's a fairy tale. $7.4 trillion, only about 18% of the budget is under the discretion of the president. The rest is mandated by law. So the only way to cut the other stuff is to change the law. So they're going to have to change Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which are the biggest consumers of it, or they can't cut $2 trillion. If it's $7 trillion, that means that 18%, 180 billion times 7. So that's about $1.6 trillion is all that is under the discretion of the president. So if Elon Musk claims he can cut the budget deficit or the budget by $2 trillion, that means he's cutting every penny the federal government spends on the military, on border security, and the Federal Aviation Administration, on the Coast Guard, on every operation, all the lights, every vehicle, all the gas, and then 400 billion more. That's horse manure. Horse manure. He can't do it. So Elon Musk is full of crap. I want you to vote for Trump, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'll tell you the truth. He's full of crap. There's no way he cuts $2 trillion. That's just stupid. But people will believe it. Anyway, but he can make the government far more efficient than it is. And he can cut some money, but he can't cut $2 trillion. I mean, we have to pay. We are obligated by the Constitution. There's only one thing the government must pay. One thing. Not national defense, not the bureaucracy, not the president's salary, not Congress, not border security. One thing, our debt. The Constitution, we are obligated to pay our debt and not miss payments on it. So that's the only thing we have to pay. But he can't cut $2 trillion. So those things aren't going to happen. Those are fairy tales and unicorns. And you know what? If people want to believe them, that's fine. If that's what it takes to vote for Trump, fine. Go vote for Trump.
Yeah. Chris, we are just over an hour busy now, an hour and 5 minutes. And I think we can sort of square off at this stage. I don't think that Trump is going to make much of a difference in the war going on in Ukraine at this stage. The Russians got certain conditions. I don't think Trump agree with those conditions. But if there's a willingness to talk, it's a starting point. And I think we are going to have that starting point very definitely. I don't know about the Middle East. Trump sounds very focused on what is going on in the Middle East. What do you think is going to happen with the present wars that is raging and probably will escalate out of control if Kamala stays in power or become the president?
Yeah, no, I think that if she stays there, we have a disaster. Now, what's interesting is that, and I didn't get to this in this hour, but let me cover very quickly, is that so many groups that traditionally vote for Democrats have abandoned Kamala Harris. The media is not spending any time on this. Unions have, by and large, not backed her. Major newspapers have refused to endorse her. Leftist newspapers aren't even endorsing Kamala Harris. She is losing black men. That's the story they all talk about, but that's going to go from 9 to 10 or 15 or maybe a little more percent for Trump. But she's lost Hispanic vote. Trump is before this nonsense at Madison Square Garden with Puerto Rico. Trump was actually ahead of her nationally with Hispanics. Now we'll see how it pans out on voting day because maybe things change. But no Republican has won a majority of Hispanic voters in modern history. And now it actually matters because they're about 16% of the population. So it really matters. So Hispanics, but the media's not talking about that. She's losing traditional unions. I already said all these different groups that traditionally vote for Democrats will not vote for Kamala Harris. Now back to the Middle East. So she's a sock puppet. She probably can't even point Palestine or Gaza or Israel on a map. If you put it right in front of her, let's even narrow it down to the region. She probably picks Syria. She has no idea. She's dumb as a box of rocks. She's a sock puppet. She will do what her handlers tell her to do. If it's not on the teleprompter, she can't tell you anything. Look at every time she's asked a question. I mean, this is the most telling one. This is when Bret Baier from Fox News, which I don't watch, but I tuned in for this because she was actually being interviewed by a real journalist, one that I lost trust in, but now have more faith in after his interview. When Bret Baier looked at her and said, "But Madam Vice President, you say you're a change agent and you're talking about the government is on the wrong path. The country is in trouble. Things need to change from the last 4 years. But many of your supporters freely admit, and those who want to vote for you are questioning, how can you be a change agent when you've been the vice president for nearly 4 years in that role? How are you going to change things?" This is her response. Now, my response would have been, you know what, Bret, you're right. I've been part of this, but as vice president, I really didn't have the authority or influence with the president who, when I ran against him, I called a racist. So he had a personal grudge against me. So he didn't give me any real authority. So I couldn't change anything. And yes, my previous views were different than they are now, but I've changed my views based on the sense of the public in America, where we're going, and I agree with Americans, and I can lead this country. That's what she should have said. But she's dumb as a box rock. See what she said? And how can you say you're a change agent? Let me be perfectly clear, Brett. Donald Trump has been running for office for 9 years. What the hell is that? Donald Trump running for office for 9 years has nothing to do with the question. Every time she's asked a question, she is dumber than a box of rocks. That is an insult to rocks. And she will not, the Middle East will become worse and worse and worse. Worse and worse and worse. She will solve nothing. We will be embroiled in more conflicts. We'll be buried in more debt. And eventually we'll be on the verge of an economic meltdown and collapse in this country. And racism, especially against the majority population of this country, which is white, will be rampant. Turn on a television. Not a single commercial has a white person on it. Most television shows are produced with almost no white actors in them anymore. And the shows with white actors of note and celebrity been around for a long time are loaded with people that are just thrown in for, for the diversity hire, the Hispanic, the American Indian, the black person, just tossed in the show. Makes no sense whatsoever. It's destroyed America, this wokeness. And this will be 4 more years of wokeness and the destruction of America. There you go.
And of course, let's not forget P. Diddy.
Yeah. Well, if Kamala Harris wins the election, we will never see the Epstein list. We will never know the truth about Weinstein, and we will never find out who was involved in the freak-offs and the white parties. It won't happen. And take a notice that all the celebrities who are performing on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris, a significant percentage of them are people in the orbit of Sean Puffy Combs, P. Diddy. People who participated in these debauched sex things in which underage children reportedly were molested and raped, and adults were forced into prostitution. It's unbelievable. But you know what? All the conspiracy theorists who talked about these pedos and about these sex things and all the debauchery of connected, rich, wealthy people like Klaus Schwab and all these others, you know what? Maybe they were right. Every time we turn around, we lift the cover and these disgusting rats flee for another direction. But tomorrow's election day. I'll be judge elections, tied up all day. I won't be broadcasting, but I will be broadcasting on my original channel at Real Chris Wyatt Wednesday morning for South Africans live. When I come back after 17 hours of working, I will go live to go over the results and analyze who won, who didn't win, if we have an answer, and where we're going. I'll probably do it for 2 or 3 hours after midnight.
But Chris, I would very much like to do a follow-up after the elections as well, and to bring all the viewers up to, up to the situation and what is happening, etc. But you are going to have a very long day ahead of you, and of course it's now 8:10 here in South Africa. And thanks a lot for coming on board tonight and have a chat with me. There's nobody that can better analyze the situation in a country than a guy that's living in the country. But even in South Africa, you will find people that can't analyze the situation in South Africa.
Oh, I know that very well. I know that very well. Yeah, but I got it right. ANC, I called it. 38 to 42% at best. And what did they get? 40%. And I made that prediction after the municipal elections in 2021. And I stuck to my guns when everybody told me I was crazy. Because I wasn't crazy. I know what I'm talking about. And I was right.
Yeah. But Chris, thanks a lot. You must have a nice evening and be strong tomorrow at the polls. Not the polls. Is it polling stations?
Well, at a polling station. It's one station. It's a big one. We have about 5,600 registered voters. Now, we never have 100% turnout, but we are likely to see tomorrow, depending on how many people do the mail-in ballots, we're likely to see at least 3,800 people show up there, would be my guess. 3,500, 3,800. That's a long day. We open 7 a.m. We close 13 hours later at 8 p.m. It's a long day.
In our time, when does the polls open?
So the polls in Pennsylvania open, now we're 7 hours from you, so 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Okay.
In Pennsylvania. But remember, the polls open at different times across the country, multiple time zones. So the last poll will close at 1 a.m. my time on Wednesday, which would be 8 o'clock in the morning your time on Wednesday. But I will be going live at 6:45 or 6:45 on Wednesday. No, wait. Yeah. No, so hang on a second. 6:45 in the morning on Wednesday when I come back. So, yep.
Okay. But guys, stay well, be safe, and be strong. And we are all looking forward to the final results. I'm going to take you off the screen now, and I'll just say goodbye to everybody. Yeah, and of course, a lot of people also say thanks, everything is coming now past, etc. Have a good night or day.
Cheers.
Okay, maar ja, daar is ons nou klaar. Nou hoef ons seker nou nie meer Engels te praat nie. Dis waar ons nou staan, was 'n lekker gesprek gewees met almal. Die was redelik interaktiewe kykers wat deelgeneem het vanaand. En baie dankie dat julle deelgeneem het en saamgesels het. And again, we want to thank Colonel Retired Chris Wyatt for the fact that he has honored us with his presence tonight. I'm always grateful to Chris for bringing us up to date on the situations, not only in the United States, but also even in South Africa and worldwide. Chris, we appreciate that. And then with that, I'm going to say good night. Lekker slaap almal. Dis dan die einde van die aand. Mooi loop tot donderdag aand.
When some saw it was a bird sky, om daar hoog in die blauwe lucht te kan draai en draai, of van bo uit die wolken af te kyk. Hoe die sandveld ver daaronder aan die Weskus lyk. Vlerkewyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Vlerkewyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Om vlerkte spanning koers te kry, oor taai beskraal en inlandsbaai verloor vlei. Nou dit weer te glip oor Wolfuis, Bosstuif, Klip en aan die ander kant van Doornbaai, met die Sessions-spoor noordoos te draai. Vlerkewyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Vlerkewyd, koers gevat, oor die veld, oor die pad, verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly. Verlore vlug, vry en bly, die bos kraai, oor die Weskus bly.